You're listening to Just Asking, a conversation about human sexuality and how to approach it with intelligence, understanding, and compassion.
Hello, everyone. This is Stephen Ng, and I'm hanging out with my friend Jackie, who has brought a stranger into our inner sanctum. Who is this?
This is Dylan Szewczak.
And you've allowed him to violate the sacred privacy we have in our sexual conversations because...
Boy, that sounded dirty the way you just said that. Dylan and I work with Dylan because it's not all about you. Sometimes I do other things.
I'm going to forgive you in advance for saying that.
And Dylan and I were talking about World of Warcraft, of all things.
Ooh.
And right now you're saying, what does this have to do with sexuality, right? But what I found from talking to Dylan is they have, and he'll tell you more about what it means to role-playing games and things like that. But
what struck you about it?
Well, what struck me about it is I've heard, I don't play online games, but I've heard that women and gay people, and I'm guessing different ethnicities, are not treated very well sometimes in these games. What struck me is that Dylan has created this virtual world of equality and respect. And so I thought it would be interesting to talk about that. And it sounds like about half of his league are either women or gay people.
Crap, I knew you were going to break out technical terms. So league.
Okay, so now I'm going to turn this over to Dylan, and I will just jump in if I have
Dylan,
questions.
how many people, first of all, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
And how many people would you guess play World of Warcraft?
Well, at its peak, there was over 12 million people playing it, and currently there's about 5 million active users.
So just a tiny little
pittance. Yeah, there's nobody at all.
Some tiny little neuro tribe of strange people out there. But out of 5 million people, how does it get organized into, what was it, your league?
Well, they're not exactly leagues. The game itself is split up into kind of microcosms based on your I guess geography in the world. So there's Asian servers, there's European servers, there's I think there's a New Zealand, Australia server, and there's the Americas.
This is sounding like a cruise ship cast. We got the Asian servers and the European servers.
Kind of server.
Yeah.
You mean computer servers.
Right. And then within those, there's kind of microcosms servers that further delineate your geography. But any one of those servers can have upwards of 1 million active players.
So what is it you're doing with World of Warcraft that's different?
Well, so World of Warcraft is a unique thing in the gaming world. It's the only truly successful MMORPG. It's been around for a decade.
MMORPG. Okay.
So we'll start at the top. MMORPG stands for Massive Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. So you think D&D. I'm sure you have some knowledge of that. Nerds hanging out in their basement with books and telling stories.
I might have to turn in my nerd card. I really am so, I'm an ancient nerd.
Yeah.
I'm a proto-nerd.
So you're before D&D. You're even further back.
I am. I'm totally before D&D.
Think fantasy to its highest extent. So
a Marvel comic book.
Yeah, if you like Marvel.
Okay.
I'm not a fan myself. But it's an environment where you can be whatever you want to be. You can it's placed in the fantasy setting. So it's not ancient Greece, it's not the future. It's something completely different that exists. It's magic, it's might, it's whatever. But in this environment, people can go in and be whatever they want. They can escape from their issues at work or home life or whatever. They can create an empire by picking flowers and making potions and selling them, or they can, gather up 19 other friends and go take down dragons and get all this notoriety.
That actually sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. It's an insane amount of fun, and I've lost a lot of my time into that game.
But as much as you enjoy it, there was something you saw often enough that you didn't like.
Toxicity.
You call that toxicity. What do you mean by that?
It's something it's a word that's being used more and more these days. kind of to explain the phenomena of online behavior. When coercive powers don't exist to kind of curtail that stuff, when you can call someone something and have, no opportunity of reprisal, no one to punch you in the face or, someone else to hold you accountable, kind of your basest nature comes out. And for a lot of people, that's pretty negative stuff.
Yeah, that's almost kind of scary even just to contemplate. If our basest nature was just free to come out, I mean, it would be really kind of like the law of the jungle, right?
Yeah, it's Hobbesian. It's the state of nature. What exists in a vacuum when no one's going to tell you what you're doing is wrong. And it can get pretty disgusting pretty quick.
Yeah, every man for himself. And as Hobbes said, the devil take the hindmost. So when we're in that world, there could be any number of vulgarities, but also it sounds like a lot of racial epithets.
Racism, sexism, homophobia.
All of
it
that.
all exists because the other is scary, and you want to talk about how it's scary, and in an environment where there's no one that's going to tell you no.
So what do you do about it?
Well, that's the question I've been trying to answer for a long time, and I think I've gotten close.
Is this a work in progress?
It was. I stepped away as my work, as Jackie knows, is spooling up and getting.
You have a real life apart from the game.
It became as it kind of came to fruition. I was working another job. I'd go home and play 4 or 5 hours a night, managing people and making sure people are behaving correctly. And
how do you do that though?
Well, so within World of Warcraft, like I was saying, you can grab 19 other friends and take down dragons and get loot and and gain notoriety. And that's
Arrgh.
I think that's the main draw of the game is what's called raiding, progression raiding. Periodically, they release new content, and you can grab your friends and go try to do it. And the first group to do it, everyone knows their name. All 5 million people that play know who they are. And
wow.
Yeah, and so that's what I was doing in the game, and I was doing pretty well, and I was, bringing good players in, and not all of them behave very well. And so I realized that in the end, it's a game. It should be there for fun. It is an escape, and it is competitive, but it should be something that I do for fun. And for me, surrounding myself with toxic behavior wasn't fun. So.
On this show, mostly what we do is we talk about sexuality. And so if I could, not to ignore the racism, because that concerns me as well, but what is the percentage of remarks that you see that are homophobic and or sexist directed against men or women?
Well, let me see if I understand the question. So like of all the negative
let's
see.
Let's say there's a ton of abusive behavior that's going on, and abuse would be that old-fashioned word before toxicity came along. But if it's name calling, I could call you a big jerk, and that's not sexist or racist, right?
I would say that over half of the negative things that are heard are either sexist or homophobic, and
wow.
Another 25% being racist, and then the last little bit just being like
general.
F you.
Yeah, half.
Yeah, I mean
that's a lot,
and it's casual. It's casual, right? It's
for the
things,
speaker.
It's things I don't want to say on a podcast, but yes, it's casual. It's people coming into a server, which is like a voice over IP. You and I are talking, but we're on other sides of the country, and just casually calling each other names, things that I wouldn't utter.
That you would never even want to be known as a person who uses that kind of language.
Exactly.
Even if you were comfortable with the occasional swear word, you might not be comfortable with other people knowing that you were comfortable using racial words or sexist terms. Now, sexist and homophobic language is half of the abuse that you encountered.
Oh, I would say at least. Yeah, and
at least.
And it's it's And I think it comes from, like we were talking about, what happens in a vacuum when no one is there to stop you, but also just a lack of knowledge, Mm-hmm. So when I started the guild and I started to really want to curtail it, I started by sitting people down and having conversations with them.
How do you do that when they're on the other side of the planet?
Well, so most of your interactions with other players takes place in what's called a Discord server. So it's kind of like an office setting where you have different cubicles that you can do things in. We have public cubicles where you hang out, or cubicles for specific types of activities. And then as a leader, I had my officer cubicle where only official people of the guild can access. And so I'd pull people down into a private cubicle, air quotes, and have conversations with them. And at first I tried to educate. You know, when someone says, you know, she should be in the kitchen making me a sandwich or something, I pull them down and I start talking about, you know, 20th century feminism and, you know, first and second wave feminism and what it means to say a woman should be in the kitchen. And that didn't take on really.
Yeah, as a therapist, I don't think that would work for me in my office either. I mean, changing human behavior is hard.
It's very hard. Very hard.
So what did you find that was more effective?
So I started to remove bad eggs. I started to say, if that's going to be your behavior, please leave. And that didn't work so much either.
Why not?
Because
they wouldn't go?
No, they would leave. I would force them to leave. But it doesn't solve the root of the problem that exists, which is... And so more people of that behavior would come in. And so I started to focus on empowering others within the community to do it. And I think that's where I really started to make progress.
Oh my God, that makes so much sense. So instead of focusing on bad people exhibiting bad behavior, you focused on people who were eager to learn how to have more good behavior.
Mm-hmm. And deputizing them, you know.
And educating them.
Right, empowering them to help curtail, because mob mentality is very powerful. You know, if you look at the state of nature, what came before governments was the mob, right? Is others policing each other and deciding
social pressure, right.
Social pressure, right? And so when you start to educate others and others that are educated, empowering them to affect change and say they don't like something, and that's where it really started to work. And
how long did that take? Well, when you say it started to work, what have you experienced in terms of the change in behavior? I mean, is it just your guild? Is it just the league you're in? Is it just some tiny little corner of World of Warcraft?
It's an oasis. It's definitely an oasis. This is not the answer. I didn't affect great change amongst all the players of World of Warcraft, but I created an oasis. And predominantly, when I decided to move along, it still saddens me, but I left it in good hands.
And does it continue to be an abuse-free environment?
Yeah, they're not competitive anymore. They're not rating at the top end like when I was there, but it continues to be an abuse-free environment. And
more importantly, does it continue to be fun?
Yes, very much so.
Well, that says it all, doesn't
it? But the most important thing is that when I started to empower people because they knew I had their back. They knew if they stood up to something and it got ugly, I would end that situation. I would do what I needed to do, whether it was removing someone or something. And so empowered people to do what they felt was right in their heart. And not only that, but it created an environment where more and more people wanted to be in it, to a point where, you know, I had more and more players in it that had the right mindset, that cared enough about these things.
You know, I am wondering, as I often do, like, okay, so how can we change the world now? Pinky, how can we change the world? And but I have a more personal question. How did this make you feel when you were able to create that oasis that was abuse free?
I think it was twofold. I think obviously I was very happy because these people that I thought were the drudges of society, that their true human nature was to be disgusting, could change and could see. But then it also made me very sad for the world, because more and more as our population goes up, as the ability to, you know, use platforms like Facebook and Twitter and all this stuff to say things without true reprisal, that it makes me very sad that this is the direction we're heading, where you can't police everyone all the time. You know, you can't always keep people accountable. And if this is their true nature, then, you know, what the future is pretty grim.
Yeah, and I can't go down that road because I'll end up committing suicide. I have so many clients who would really resent that.
Yeah.
That's very depressing to think about.
Right.
In fact, it's more encouraging for me to think, no, single-handedly, and then with the help of the other people in your group, you were able to create this wonderful environment that was free of homophobia and sexism. And it's sort of like a man who is trying to change a habit, and he starts working out and he's got 1 day in. And then if he can do it for 1 day, he can do it for another. And if he can do it for, 7 days, he can do it for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And if he can do it for a week, then he can do it for a month. And this hope sort of builds on itself, and there's this sense of expectation. And I'm sort of, it's been a long time since I was a teenager and had that kind of angst that goes with being a teenager. But I feel more hopeful because you were doing this like part-time, just for your own personal comfort.
Right.
And it made your life better. And I'm thinking,
very much so.
Why? So there's really nothing to stop anybody else who's listening to this from doing the same thing in their
I think it is a roadmap that can be applied to the world. I think that as it becomes harder to police people and hold them accountable because, workplaces are growing. You don't always have a boss looking over the shoulder. You don't always have, a coercive power to say, stop it, you're behaving poorly. And I think it really falls to our shoulders to police each other, to make sure that each of us are creating an environment that is more politically correct, not just for the nature of being politically correct, but just doing the right thing.
Yeah, because that's its own reward.
Yeah.
Treating people decently.
Yeah.
So can I ask you, I guess I'm dying to know some more about this, because if one person can do this, why isn't it the case that they're doing this on Facebook and on social media, all the other social media out there? Because if one person can do this and make this big of a change, and it feels that great to be living in an environment that's free of the pervasive sexism and racism that we experience in this world, why isn't that happening more, do you think?
Because it's hard. It's hard.
Okay, so when you say it's hard, what kind of things would you say to somebody to confront them? And I mean, you haul them off. Let's see, no, you don't haul them off to the private room anymore. You're talking to the people who are already the good people, the people who never use this language. What would you advise them to do when they encounter somebody who uses a sexist slur or some kind of homophobic insult?
I would say that education is very helpful. Just telling someone something is wrong is hard, but like we're talking about, it's hard to change their nature. And I think examples of correctness are really important. So if we're not afraid to go out and behave correctly and empower women and help each other and support gay marriage and just make it okay, and then people that would want to disparage that online or whatever see us being empowering and helping each other, maybe we can affect change. I don't know.
Well, that would be inspiring to me, because that's a more powerful tribe. I mean, the tribe that has more unit cohesion is far more powerful than the one that's feeding on itself like a school of wounded sharks.
Right. And all these platforms, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or something, it is de-tribalizing our society. Everyone becomes an individual online that's spewing rhetoric or something, but whether they're a part of something as a greater whole, not so much. And so if we go out and we march, we treat each other better, we show, like you're saying, a tribe that cares, that has that cohesion. I think it is inspiring. I find it very inspiring. But you're holding back the secret sauce. I want to know, what is the recipe for getting, let's say I'm a 14-year-old guy and I want to do the right thing and I never use that kind of language, but there's some older guys in my group who are using that language. How do I confront them? Well, I would say that 14-year-old is probably a member of my guild, right? And I think that he needs role models. He needs people that he can see will step in and stand up for him if he does the right thing.
And what would you model? What would be the behavior? You step in and you say,
Unfortunately, I think it comes down to our leadership. It comes down to our bosses treating situations of sexism and homophobia in the workplace as a serious matter, that, an employee stands up to someone who's behaving that way and doesn't just report it, stands up and then is empowered by their boss, like I empowered my, officers and deputies, my teammates, to do the right thing. And I think that's something that's really lacking in our culture, is having
I don't know how you can say that with our president, but in any case,
having leadership that is holding us to a higher standard, and when we do the right thing, stand up for us. When we stand up to sexism and homophobia and things of that nature, we need to be empowered by whether it's our local law enforcement or our management at work or whatever.
Yeah, this is really encouraging to me, and yet you're still holding back. So what kind of leadership model, what would the leader model when somebody like, me, says something like, well, she belongs in the kitchen with all the other ladies. And now that's a very sexist remark, and you would confront me?
I would confront you and tell you that that's not okay.
You tell me that's not okay, and I say, huh?
Well,
something intelligent like that.
Very intelligent, yeah. Well, I mean...
And then what would you say?
It's hard. It's definitely hard. I would love to sit down and explain to you why that's a sexist thing, why that's a terrible thing to say. But the issue is not that I can do that, right? The issue is that there's no coercive power backing me up there.
Right. So, but you're modeling the behavior for the other people, and as you said before,
right,
group pressure helps people to change their behavior. So if nobody's accepting it, Jackie, can you help us?
So I'm wondering if just saying that's not okay.
If that's enough.
If that's enough sometimes, because...
Well, is it? That's what I want to ask the expert here.
I think sometimes it is. And one of the things, like with sexist language, we've talked about this on other shows. Sometimes, like if somebody insults me, a man insults me for being a woman, and I say, hey, not okay. And he's like, whatever, women in their mouths, right? But if somebody else comes in and says, hey, dude, not okay, right? I mean, and then he has to, at the very least, he has to shut up. Even if you haven't changed the way he thinks, you've let him know that is not okay here. And I feel like...
It's not, our culture does not accept that kind of behavior.
Yeah, and I think that is a beginning. And I know that I have got, I've been a wet blanket plenty of times in parties when somebody has said something racist or sexist or homophobic, and I've said, you know what, dude, not okay. And a lot of times they'll just go, oh, okay. Because they thought it was.
Okay, so that's another wrinkle on this, is that it is not the case that behind every sexist remark there's a horrible person.
Right.
Sometimes there's just a thoughtless person who got careless, or a person who just had a bad day and said something without thinking. And I suppose that's also true of some of the homophobic remarks that get made very thoughtlessly. But I guess I'm still wondering, then, the people who are watching, what your experience has been online gaming, is that it changes human behavior. Because I think this would be news to most of the rest of the world, that you can actually change that very homophobic, very sexist group of people who are seemingly very intransigent as they troll the universe.
Mm-hmm.
That they can change.
They can change. And I think Jackie's right. I think what it comes down to is twofold. It's supporting each other when we do stand up for it. Just saying no is enough if people see that you're not the only one saying no, right? That it is something that is wrong because the tribe feels that it is wrong. And I think we have too many people standing up for things by themselves. And not just that, having also members in power, in positions as role models, to show that they stand up for those things.
Have you ever talked about this on any other platforms like Reddit or anything like that? Because I think it's an idea that if we could start learning to have each other's back, I would strongly recommend this. I know in my family, My wife and I are both committed to an abuse-free lifestyle, and that means no racism or sexism or anything like that. So for us, holding the line on that means that our home is now a safe place. It's a safe zone. We don't treat each other like that, and we're certainly not going to allow guests and visitors and children to come over and behave that way. And so it does change our world. And you've changed your world, and I just want to congratulate you for that. I think it's really amazing.
Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. It's really amazing. I'm trying to think of some way to help more people learn how to do this. And I hope the people who are listening to this get the idea that it's really as simple as speaking up, and it's in your hands. And if you're not speaking up, then you really have to ask yourself, why not? What is the ghost in the machine that I'm afraid of? Why am I not speaking up? And come to grips with that. Thanks again for showing up.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Jackie, you can bring friends anytime.
Right? I told you. I told you he was smart and would have amazing things to teach you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. And if you have questions for Stephen, please tweet us at StephenIngMFT.